Hello everybody, I'm James Dent and I'm here to talk to you guys about Vygotsky's thoughts on social interaction. Oh, I just realized this is backwards. Sorry, I was going to use little note cards, but that's going to be kind of useless. On social interaction and sociocultural theory. Now, I did quite a bit of different readings on this, and I came across a few things, but before I really delve into the theories itself, I want to give everybody a little bit of background information on Vygotsky. He was born in 1896 in what is now Belarus, but at that time it was Orsha of the Russian Empire. And he actually died very young at the age of 37 in the Soviet Union in Moscow in 1934. He was a graduate of Moscow State University. He had quite a bit of knowledge about that he shared with everybody about how children develop and other such things. But here in the United States, he really did not come to prominence until his book, which I have written down here, Thought and Language, which you guys still can't read because it's backwards, anyway, was published posthumously in 1962. Once that book was published, his theories and everything about how children develop and the psychology of it really came to prominence. Now, he was, when it came to developing children, he had a catchphrase that he used quite a bit that was called ZPD. And ZPD, for lack of a, just to give you guys with a straight answer, and this is again backwards, sorry, the zone of proximal development. This theory that he came up with really kind of pushed the bar as far as changing the way people approached how children developed, how children learned, all these kinds of different things. Basically, this term that he developed is for the range of tasks that children can do in the process of learning. Okay? So if a child is in a group, they're going to learn, pretty much what other members of the group are going to learn. It was also has been described as the mechanism by which development occurs in children. That's another terminology for it. ZPD is technically, it's the difference between what a learner can do independently and what can be done with the help of a more experienced or knowledgeable teacher. So, for the purpose of cognitive development, a teacher, might be a family member, a classroom member, peer, or community member. It's basically going to be somebody that is around them that they interact with on a regular basis. Now, we've kind of seen, I know I've seen it firsthand, whether it was in one of my classes growing up, whether it was playing baseball or playing another sport or, anything along that line. You can learn things just by being around somebody. Okay? So, he was taking that step as saying that children are going to learn what they are basically engulfed in, what they're around on a daily basis, who they're around on a daily basis. One of the ways that I personally see this theory and work is at school. We all know that we have just a huge percentage of students that are reading below the normal level or below grade level, however you want to put it. But most of these children that are reading below reading level were not read to as a kid. The people that they were around as a child did not read or did not read to them. I know personally, I could read by the time I was 4 years old because my mother was constantly I mean, constantly reading to me. Before I even went to my first day of kindergarten, I had all the stack like this big of Dr. Seuss books that I could read from cover to cover by myself. I was constantly engulfed in reading as a child. Um, I personally also still am. You can see my little Spider-Man thing back here. Been huge into comic books. One of the things that I've always loved about comic books is, and this is something that I didn't find out until I got older, when I was about 12 or 13, was that comic books are written at a college vocabulary level. So if you're reading comic books at a young age, you're going to be exposed to words that some people aren't exposed to until they get much higher up in grade level. So if you're a 5 or 6-year-old kid and you're reading comic books, you're going to be exposed to some pretty big words. Now, I know I used to always have this little Webster's dictionary that I kept over here or over here, and if I'd come across a word I didn't know, I'd look it up, and that helped expand my vocabulary. I'd like to think I had a pretty good, solid vocabulary as a kid, but that helped expand my vocabulary even more. But as far as children being around people that read to them and everything like this ties in directly with Vygotsky's, theory of zone of proximal development. Basically, a better way I think that you can explain the relation between, it's a better way to explain the relation between child's learning and their development, because prior to this theory being readily used, some of the other learning things were looked at in this way. You had constructivism, you had behaviorism, and you had gestaltism. Now, constructivism is where children first need to meet a particular level before any learning can occur. What that means is that they have to develop before they can start learning. Okay? The second one, behaviorism, is that learning and development happen at the same time. Okay? So, or they can't be separated. Okay? So that's what behaviorism is. And it's basically stating that when you're developing, when you're growing, when you're learning, it's all part of the same process. Whether you're learning about yourself through your body, or whether you're learning about things in a book or whatever, it's all happening at the same time. So that's behaviorism. The last one, gestaltism, is basically named after the theorist Gestalt, and it states that learning and development, they might be separate, but they're interactive processes, meaning that you are going to learn about development as you're learning about this, as you're learning about that. And they have kind of I guess you could say they have a symbiotic relationship. So almost all of this terminology that comes from Vygotsky is centered around his ZPD theory that he came up with. And basically that students or children, anybody really that's trying to learn, they're going to learn based on the things that they're brought up around. So if you are in a community of people that are like philosophers and thinkers and mathematicians and everything like that, you're going to get a completely different education, a completely different development than somebody that grows up on a farm, who's maybe only around their parents and their family members. Everybody is going to develop based upon who they're around growing up. The reason I brought up those other three, which are the traditional ways that people say you learn, is because with the ZPD, Vygotsky basically rejected those theories. He thought his theory was the more preeminent one, and that students, he believes learning always preceded development. And that's the big part of what his theories all revolve around. So I hope this was enlightening for you. I know that even as a person, I consider myself fairly intelligent, but sometimes some of these theories, when you start getting into people with education, they get over complicated to me. And I try and do my best to simplify it, which with my students, I try and simplify things. At the same time, I try and expose them to vocabulary so that they can understand better what's going on around them and maybe have better word choices and everything. But for for the same token, I try not to overuse big words with them. And if I do use big words, I try and explain them. But getting into these theories and everything like this, a lot of it was just like I was sitting there going, oh my gosh, how am I going to talk about this? And, kind of simplify it so that everybody can understand it. Because some of these terms, especially when you're getting into education, are big. And you sit there and you overanalyze what the word means. But based on everything that I read about Vygotsky, I think this is a pretty succinct summarization of that. So thank you. I hope you enjoyed. Bye-bye.